One night, 185,000 soldiers went to sleep inside their tents, and in the morning, they never woke up again. No battle was fought, no sword was drawn by human hands, no war cry was heard before it happened, just silence. And then, dawn revealing a field of the dead, stretching further than the eye could see. This is not a myth passed down by campfire storytellers. This is a story recorded in the Bible, in the Assyrian records, and in the memory of an empire that never fully recovered. And at the center of it, according to ancient texts, stands a single being, a being the Bible names simply as the Angel of the Lord, a being later identified across centuries of tradition as the Archangel Michael. Tonight, we ask the question almost no one dares to ask: who or what was truly capable of this? And more than that, if this being could do this once, what else has he done throughout history that we've simply forgotten to ask about? To understand this night, we have to go back to the 8th century BC. The Assyrian Empire was not just powerful, it was by far the most feared military force on earth. For over a century, Assyria had been perfecting the art of war in a way no civilization before it ever had. Iron weapons, siege engines capable of breaking through walls that had stood for generations, a military machine so effective that entire regions surrendered the moment Assyrian banners appeared on the horizon. Its armies had already crushed kingdom after kingdom. Its king, Sennacherib, ruled from the great city of Nineveh, a capital so vast and so richly decorated that visitors described it as something closer to myth than reality. City walls meant nothing to him. Alliances meant nothing to him. Nations that resisted were erased from the map, their people scattered across the empire in forced deportations, their kings humiliated in the streets of Assyrian capitals, paraded before crowds as trophies of conquest. The Assyrians did not merely defeat their enemies, they made examples of them. Captured rulers were sometimes kept in cages. Rebellious cities were razed so completely that later generations couldn't identify where they once stood. And now, his eyes had turned toward a small, defiant kingdom in the hills of Judah. Its king, Hezekiah, had done the unthinkable. He had refused to bow. Sennacherib's response was immediate and brutal. According to both biblical accounts and Assyrian inscriptions found by archaeologists, inscriptions Sennacherib himself commissioned to boast of his own victories, the Assyrian king swept through Judah like fire through dry grass. City after city fell. 46 fortified towns, by his own boastful record, were captured and destroyed. Countless smaller villages were burned without a second thought. Only one city remained, Jerusalem. Sennacherib surrounded it completely. His own inscriptions, carved in stone and later unearthed by archaeologists in the 19th century, describe trapping Hezekiah inside like a bird in a cage. He listed the tribute he demanded in staggering detail: gold, silver, furry, precious woods, as if Jerusalem's surrender was already a formality, a matter of days. There was no way out, no army large enough to break the siege, no ally willing to risk Assyrian wrath. Egypt, the one power that might have intervened, was distracted by its own troubles and offered no meaningful help. Inside the city walls, panic spread. The people of Jerusalem could see from their rooftops an ocean of enemy tents stretching across the valley below. Cooking fires by the thousands, filling the night with smoke. Weapons catching the last light of the sun. The sound of a foreign army settling in for what everyone assumed would be the final assault. By every military calculation, Jerusalem was already lost. Historians who study the period agree, by any conventional measure of ancient warfare, this siege should have ended exactly like the 46 that came before it. The Assyrian commanders mocked the city openly. Sennacherib sent his field commander, known in the text as the Rabshakeh, to stand beneath the walls and shout taunts in Hebrew, so every soldier and every citizen on the ramparts could understand exactly what was being said. He mocked their trust in Egypt, calling it a broken reed that would pierce the hand of anyone who leaned on it. He mocked their trust in their own God, reminding them that no god of any nation Assyria had conquered had managed to save its people. He asked mockingly in front of the entire terrified population, "Where is your God now? What god has ever saved a city from Assyria?" It was psychological warfare as much as physical siege, an attempt to break the will of the city before a single wall was breached. Hezekiah did something unexpected. He didn't call for more soldiers because there were none left to call. He didn't try to negotiate because he had nothing left to offer that Sennacherib hadn't already taken. He walked into the temple, alone, carrying the threatening letter Sennacherib had sent him, and he spread it open before what he believed was the presence of God. And he prayed, not for victory, not for glory, not even for the destruction of his enemies. He prayed simply to be saved, and according to the text, for the world to know that this God was real, not merely one more local deity about to be proven powerless like all the others. According to the account, the response didn't come as thunder or vision. It came through a man, the prophet Isaiah, who sent word to Hezekiah that the city would not fall, that Sennacherib would not even fire a single arrow into it, that he would return to his own land by the very road he came, and fall there, not in Jerusalem. To a king staring at the most powerful army in the world camped outside his gates, this must have sounded almost absurd. There was no visible reason for it to be true. No reinforcements were arriving. No secret alliance had formed overnight. Nothing about the military situation had changed in the slightest. And yet Hezekiah, according to the text, held on to this single promise. As the sun set on what may have been the last full day, Jerusalem existed as a free city. Outside the walls, the Assyrian camp settled into its nightly rhythm, utterly unaware that anything had shifted. Soldiers ate. Soldiers laughed around their fires, trading stories of previous conquests, previous cities that had fallen exactly as this one soon would. Commanders reviewed the next day's plan, the plan to finally break Jerusalem's walls and end this siege once and for all, likely within days, if not hours. Nothing about this night seemed different from any other night of the campaign. The routines of an army confident in its own invincibility continued exactly as they had for months. The stars came out over the valley. The fires burned low, one by one, as exhausted men settled into their tents. Exhausted men, confident in their overwhelming numbers, fell asleep. 185,000 of them, according to the ancient record, believing tomorrow would bring them the final victory they'd been promised since the campaign began. They had no idea that, for most of them, there would be no tomorrow at all. The biblical text describes what happened next in a single, chilling sentence. And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. No battle description, no drawn-out struggle, no sound recorded, no cry of alarm, no moment of resistance. just an angel moving through the camp in the darkness, and the outcome stated as simply and as devastatingly as a historical fact. Ancient tradition does not describe wings and soft light the way modern religious art often does. Early Jewish and Christian sources describe something far more unsettling, a presence that brought death simply by passing near it. Silent, instant, absolute. Not a warrior locked in combat, but something closer to an executioner carrying out a sentence already decided. Some later commentators, both ancient and modern, suggested a plague swept through the camp that night, and if so, it would explain the totality and speed of the devastation, since crowded military camps in the ancient world were notoriously vulnerable to sudden disease outbreaks. But the text itself is unambiguous about the source. This was not disease finding its way through a crowded camp by chance, spreading gradually over days. This was deliberate. This happened in a single night, all at once, across an enormous encampment stretching for miles. This was, in the ancient mind, judgment delivered by a being who did not need an army, because he was, himself, worth more than one. A being for whom 185,000 armed soldiers posed no more threat than 185,000 sleeping children. When dawn broke over the valley, the first soldiers to wake found something no army in recorded history was prepared to find. Their comrades were not sleeping. Row after row, tent after tent, men lay motionless where they had fallen asleep hours before. No wounds from swords, no signs of a struggle, no enemy footprints leading in or out of the camp, no trampled ground, no broken weapons, nothing that any soldier could point to and say, "Here, this is where the fighting happened." Just silence, and the dead, exactly as they had lain down the night before. The survivors, and there were survivors, though far fewer than the night before, didn't wait to understand what had happened. There was no order given, no chain of command holding. Panic swept through what remained of the greatest army on earth, an army that had never once, in living memory, known what it felt like to lose. Sennacherib himself, according to the record, broke camp immediately and retreated to Nineveh, hundreds of miles away. His campaign against Jerusalem abandoned entirely, his reputation as an unbeatable conqueror shattered in a single morning. The city that, by every military calculation, should have fallen within days, stood untouched. Not a single stone of its walls had been breached. For centuries, scholars and theologians have debated exactly who this angel of the Lord truly was. Jewish tradition, developing over the centuries that followed this event, increasingly pointed to one name, Michael. Not just any angel among countless heavenly messengers, but the one described elsewhere in Scripture as the great prince who stands watch over your people, a phrase that appears in the book of Daniel, describing a being with authority specifically over conflict, protection, and the fate of entire nations, not individuals. Michael is never portrayed in ancient texts as a gentle, passive figure delivering messages or offering comfort. He is consistently described as a military commander, a being whose very title, Michael, is often translated as, "Who is like God?" Not a statement of humility, but something closer to a battle cry, a challenge thrown at any power, human or otherwise, that dares to stand against heaven's order. In the book of Daniel, Michael appears not once but repeatedly, always in the context of conflict, described as fighting alongside a heavenly messenger against the Prince of Persia, a phrase many scholars interpret as referring to a spiritual power standing behind an earthly kingdom rather than a human ruler alone. This detail matters because it suggests something the ancient world took for granted, but that we've largely forgotten. The idea that the wars fought on Earth were, in this worldview, shadows of a much larger conflict, happening in a realm most people would never see. In later apocalyptic traditions, particularly in the Book of Revelation, Michael is the one who leads heaven's armies against Satan's forces in the war described as taking place in heaven itself, a war ending with Satan and his followers being cast down. He is the one described as standing at the edge of history itself, present at the final battle described in Jewish apocalyptic literature, as well as later Christian tradition. A single night outside Jerusalem, then, may have simply been a preview, a single demonstration, on a comparatively small scale, of a power this being is described as wielding on a cosmic level. This wasn't the only moment in ancient texts where destruction of this scale was attributed to a single divine agent, rather than an army or a natural disaster explained in purely human terms. Ancient Near Eastern peoples, across many cultures, not just the Israelites, lived with the constant understanding that unseen forces shaped the outcomes of battles, far more than swords and numbers ever could. Empires didn't just fall to rival empires. In the ancient mind, they fell when heaven itself decided their time was over, regardless of how many soldiers stood in their armies or how thick their walls had been built. What makes the story of the 185,000 so remarkable, even among other accounts of sudden divine intervention in ancient texts, is its scale and its precision. Not a slow plague spreading over weeks, not a gradual military retreat under pressure. One night, one devastating stroke, affecting an area historians estimate would have covered miles of tents and encampments, and an empire that, historians broadly agree, never fully recovered its former dominance in the region in the years that followed. Sennacherib himself would be assassinated years later, not on some distant battlefield, but inside the very temple of his own god, killed by his own sons, in what ancient writers, both Assyrian and biblical, treated as an ending far too fitting to be coincidence. The man who had mocked the god of a small kingdom in the hills died at the hands of his own family, in the house of the god he trusted most. What makes this story unusually well documented compared to many biblical accounts is that we don't only have the Israelite perspective. Sennacherib's own annals, clay prisms inscribed at his order, several of which survive to this day in museum collections, describe the siege of Jerusalem in remarkable detail, boasting of the 46 towns destroyed, the tribute extracted, the king trapped, like a caged bird. And then they simply stop. They never claim the city fell. They never claim Hezekiah was captured or killed. For a king whose inscriptions elsewhere boast, in exhausting detail, of every victory down to the smallest captured village, the sudden silence regarding the one campaign's actual outcome has struck historians for over a century as deeply unusual. An empire built on advertising its own dominance, on carving its triumphs into stone for eternity, chose not to explain what actually happened to the army that had surrounded Jerusalem. Whatever occurred, it was not something Sennacherib's scribes wanted permanently recorded in his own words. So what really happened in that valley outside Jerusalem more than 2,700 years ago? Was it a devastating outbreak of disease, arriving at the exact moment a desperate king prayed for deliverance, a natural catastrophe that simply happened to align, with uncanny timing, with the very promise made by the prophet Isaiah? Or was it something else, something that still defies easy explanation, recorded not by one, but by multiple ancient sources with very different motives, who had every reason to exaggerate a victory, and yet described it, in the biblical account at least, with almost eerie restraint, a single sentence, rather than pages of triumphant detail? What we do know from both sides of the historical record is this: an empire that had never lost everything in a single night, a city that should have fallen, by every rational military calculation, didn't, and a name, Michael, became forever tied across Jewish, Christian, and later Islamic tradition to the idea that even the mightiest army ever assembled on earth is nothing in the face of a single being who serves a higher order. Whether you see this as history, as legend, or as something in between, one question remains, echoing across nearly 3,000 years of retelling. If it happened once, what else might Michael have been sent to do, in stories still waiting to be told, in moments history recorded without ever naming the true cause? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and if you want to understand where Michael comes from, his role before this night, in the very origins of the war described as taking place in heaven itself, that story is coming next.